At the time of recording this video, I shot my first creative portrait session just over 2 years ago. And since then, I've managed to build a successful and profitable business around portrait photography. I've shot multiple different styles, locations around the world, and different lighting conditions. And while I'm still learning new techniques and skills every time I go out and shoot, here's what I've learned so far. Portrait photography is simple. One of the biggest lessons that I've learned so far is to simplify the shooting process and also simplify my shooting style. And what I mean by portrait photography is simple. I really mean that there's 4 elements that make up a portrait photo. You have the environment, you have the subject, you have the lighting conditions, and then you also have your overall composition. And when you find inspiration online that you want to emulate that look, use this list to find and break down why that photo appeals to you. Start with the location that the image is shot in, then move on to how the subject is posed or how they're showing emotion in the photo. Is it natural light? What time of the day are they shooting? Are they using soft or harsh light? What focal length do you think they used? And what makes the overall composition interesting? And then on the shoot, you can purely just focus on your composition and your lighting. And that's probably my biggest mistake from previous portrait sessions, is having no idea or direction for the shoot and lacking inspiration from other photographers, making me feel actually quite frustrated on the shoot as I had to think of ideas on the spot. I've also simplified my gear. I don't have the desire to have multiple different focal lengths, to have the sharpest lens available, or the latest camera with the best autofocus. And the 2 focal lengths that I have found to be the most simple and effective way to tell a story with portrait photography is the 24 and the 50mm prime lens. Simplifying my gear has provided me more creative freedom and removed all of these unnecessary distractions. Lighting is key. The human eye is trained to observe the brightest or the most contrast part of an image. And when I was told this, it was like a literal light bulb of realization going off in my head as I stopped shooting for the edit to manipulate the light and contrast in the scene to recover the maximum amount of data in the shadows and the highlights, basically to stop trying to maximize my dynamic range of my really impressive raw files. And the best way to practice this is actually with film photography. Film photography is the complete opposite to shooting for the edit. And while shooting on film, it actually does improve your photography a lot. So I now light my portraits in a way that the in-camera results are somewhat close to what my final edit would look like. I do like to manipulate the colors to look like film with my presets. By the way, guys, if you do like how I edit my photos, I do sell Lightroom presets and they are linked in the description down below. And lastly, lighting doesn't have to be perfect. Going out in different lighting conditions or trying out different lighting techniques is definitely the best way to find your photography style. Screw the rules. While there's definitely no strict rules in portrait photography, there's definitely guidelines that can help you create compelling portraits. Learning these guidelines is great, and it's definitely something to practice when you're first starting out with portrait photography. But I've found my favorite images so far have been from completely bending or disregarding the rules entirely. Things like not following the rule of thirds, shooting on wider focal lengths like the 24mm rather than the more traditional 85 to get those more flattering facial features, shooting at different and absurd angles for intentional perspective distortion to create visual interest, and lastly, not shooting everything wide open at f1.4 to get the maximum amount of background separation. Shooting at higher f-stops like f4, f5.6, you can get really creative to add depth within your image by simplifying the background and adding layers and getting creative with lighting. This is something that definitely separates the pros from the beginners. You'll see higher end successful portrait photographers not utilizing a fast prime to add depth to their images. And I feel following these guidelines and what everyone else is doing, you're going to end up with a technically good photo. You're going to shoot on the correct shutter speed, the correct focal length, the exposure and your white balance is good, and you just haven't over edited the photo, etc. But the photo isn't great and doesn't stand out among the noise of every other good portrait photo and every other photographer. To stand out and show your voice, you really have to experiment with different things, find what works, roll with it, and experiment more to ultimately find and perfect your photography style. Don't expect to be noticed. My biggest disappointment in portrait photography is that I never really got noticed by any brands at the start, and I wasn't getting any work with my portfolio. But if you think about it, how do brands find photographers? You know, if you go out and post a portrait photo to social media and it gets good engagement, don't expect brands to just flood into your DMs, because that engagement that you're getting is that you're just showing your work to other like-minded photographers and creators. If you want to start working with brands, all you need to do is build a portfolio of the style that you want to shoot in, and then just reach out to different brands and agencies. Start small with test shoots or smaller budgets, and over time you'll increase your reputation and your network. This is something that I'm personally focusing more on 2024, as I want to stop doing so many weddings, as that has been my main income with portrait photography. But I've definitely found that if you want to make money in portrait photography, weddings is definitely the best way to start. If weddings are not your thing, just consider that it's a start and not an end goal. Alright guys, that is my insights of what I've learned after 2 years of shooting portraits. It's been a big journey and I've definitely learned a lot. If you guys like how I've edited these photos, I do sell Lightroom presets, plus all the gear and the different lenses and cameras that I use. I have left links in the description down below. And I'm gonna get out of here because I am literally sweating up a storm. I'm gonna go to the beach, and I hope you have a great week.